trying to think, I try.
Rob, welcome to the campfire, my friend.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me. I much appreciate it.
Absolutely. I was really excited when I was digging into your stuff and I found out that you spent some time living here in Michigan as well.
Yes, sir. I was born in Detroit and raised in Mount Clemens, kindergarten through 12th grade. It was a great place to grow up.
It is. It's really beautiful area. It's like you get a good combination of city life, but there's the escape to get into nature. That's something I really love about Michigan is the fact that it doesn't take much effort to find some kind of solace within nature.
I agree completely. When I was a kid growing up, the Clinton River was polluted, but they cleaned it up in the Michigan area in Mount Clemens, and we used to go tobogganing, and we'd go ice skating behind the hills near the river. Then later on, traveling, of course, the Upper Peninsula, the beaches on the west and the east coast. It's such a beautiful, just a beautiful state. You're right. Even the city, Detroit is fun. Frankenmuth was a blast. I don't know if you've ever been to Frankenmuth. I'm sure you have. Just a really, really great little town and very, very popular. So many little sites in Michigan that I've never been to Copper Harbor though. That was on the bucket list when we. I did live in Flint and Davison for a while too. Went back for a job in Michigan. So a nice suburbia, like you said, but still close to the airports and civilization. I agree.
That's where I find a lot of comfort and I find the ability to look back on my story and my journey and really put the pieces together because I can fade in and out of, the concrete world. I can drift in and out of nature and really make it understand. And I want to talk and dive into your background because it's very intriguing to me. So walk me through that story a little bit. Tell me a little bit about the journey that brought you to where you are today.
Okay. Well, like I said, raised in Mount Clemens. I was one of three Jewish kids in my high school. It was about 40% African American. Never felt any anti-Semitism back then, back in the day. There was a lot of trash talk. There was a lot of bullying, but it was all left on the field. So the things have changed quite a bit now, especially with college campuses. But growing up, it was not like that. By the time I graduated and I was a senior, you were respected, if not for academia, but also for just being a nice guy, being a mensch, as they say, and being athletic, being part of multiple teams, and that takes it a long way. So, speaking of which, I'm flashing forward a little bit. I have a University of South Carolina book presentation next week, and that's my first university talk, and that was through a connection from high school. Professor Calvert, he's now retired, but he's 2 years behind me on the swim team and also on the soccer team. So never burn your bridges. So I went to Tufts University and for undergrad, and then University of Michigan for medical school. Very fortunate. Ann Arbor was a great place to live too, and just a fun town. I wish I were a little less busy, but I always made time to catch a game occasionally, or a hike, or a drive out in the woods, whatever the case might be. And then an internship in Boston, and I did my radiology residency at Brown and a neuroradiology fellowship at Yale. And now I'm 30, so I'm like halfway to where I am now. So those are my indentured servantry days. And then I've been practicing radiology. I just retired after 35 years, 44 all in when you consider all that schooling and internship. So it was a pretty good career. I got bounced around a little bit, but my job in Michigan, by the way, was my favorite. That was the best 7, 9 years of my life, I would say. In my 40s, making some money, able to travel, did all the sports teams. I'm a big Lions fan, Pistons, all of it. All the concerts, Pine Knob. You probably know about Pine Knob. Used to go to 20 concerts a year, limo rides. It was a real blast. So I'm not. I've got a lot of friends that are hunters, and I got a lot of friends that are fishermen. But neither one has really been my gig. But when we talk about my dad's stories, there's a lot of outdoorsmanship out of necessity. I mean, he was a survivor. So, but I am interested in sports, music. Like I said, I'm a foodie. I'm big into fitness and nutrition, golf, history, education, travel, investing. So I've got a lot of interests too. And then, of course, the history of my book and what we're doing now, which is fighting anti-Semitism.
As I listen, I like to kind of hone in on the little nuggets of amazing theory and ideas that somebody kind of throws out there without even really putting a lot of thought into it. You mentioned the idea of not burning your bridges as you go through life because they can come back and they can help you later on. And I know with a lot of people that I've spoken to and worked with, that is one of the hardest things to not only keep in mind, but practice. So I want to stop here for a minute. I want to kind of talk about that. I want you to explore that idea and share with me and the people that are listening how you keep that thought in mind and how you keep that into practice.
Well, more so now than before because I have burned my bridges. I've pissed people off in the past when they didn't renew our contract on my first real job in Massachusetts, and boy was I angry and burnt a lot of bridges. It didn't matter at that point, but it is possible to do that, and I did it again later in my career. It was inadvertently. I just changed from one job to another that just seemed it was closer to home and it was a little bit of an easier workload. The money was about the same or better, and I wasn't nasty about it, but I just inadvertently I burned my bridges because the group that I left took over the practice that I was in, and they didn't rehire me, even though I was only there about 9 months, and we worked really hard. So it was so I didn't get renewed. I didn't get so that was my last job. Actually, that wasn't my last job in New England. So, but yeah, I mean, I didn't try to burn bridges, but the last 5, 10 years, otherwise, no way. I don't walk away quietly. You never know who can help you. You never know who you can help. And the message is, just being kind to people. Circumstances change, and so people do lose jobs. People die. They get sick. You lose touch with people. So it's nice to try to keep friends if you can and stay in touch with people. And this is what I do. This is what I do.
And I think it's a lot of that understanding your position within the moment. And that's where mindfulness really helps because, you mentioned, yeah, you got angry in the moment, you burned a couple of bridges along the way. When you look back now, you realize the motivation for it. It came out of anger in the moment. Had you been able to step outside of that anger, the outcome may have been a little bit different. To me, that's the tool that when I get out into nature and I see animals at work, I see that unfold, because they get territorial and they kind of push the next animal out of that space. But then they go off and they find a whole new space. So that other animal is able to come back in and they might come back later and they're peaceful, they're playing and they're doing whatever it is they do together. To me, that's a reflection of how the emotions work in a moment. You think about I'm fired up, I'm angry, so I had that territorial position. Nobody's coming into me. I'm only doing what's best for me in this moment. But then I walk away and somebody else fills that space, different feelings come up, and now I'm looking at it more logically. So if you're able to slow things down and just understand that that emotion is there, you can explore it internally before you express it. And you can educate yourself to find the correct vocabulary to make it where you're not burning that bridge before you end up crossing it later.
I agree. No, I agree with you, and that's a great analogy. The animals, I love the analogy. A few of your words were out, but I got the gist of actually not your words, your video, but no problem. It's I understood what you said, and your audio was good, and that's a well said point. I mean, animals, humans are the only ones who hurt each other. I mean, with a few species with exceptions, such as certain snakes and black widows and really, really aggressive animals. And you see them fight over. We see it with the ducks down here in Florida every day. They're so territorial, but 10 minutes later, 5 minutes later, they're all at peace. So it's a great lesson, and you're right.
There's this duck that I've been watching at a local park since the beginning of spring. And at the beginning of spring, he was in really good shape, really good health. But somewhere along the line, he must have crossed paths with a territorial goose or another duck because over the past couple of weeks, he's had a real bad limp. And that healing process, when we get into somebody else's territory and there's that aggression that we're a victim of, or metaphorically, we're that duck and we've got a broken leg now. Understanding that we can still go forward, we can heal. We don't have to take things for the way that they're projected. We can find our own understanding and logic without that judgment. I think is a great space for us to be able to uncover the ability to move past something and let it go. So down the line, if you cross paths with somebody, you're not trying to rebuild a bridge because there's already something there to work with.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, my dad was a good example of that. He was an OBGYN. He delivered 10,000 babies in the Detroit area after everything he went through, and he had every reason to have PTSD and depression, and could have gone to the bottle or to drugs and or anxiety, and he never showed that. You would never know what he went through. He was jovial and jolly, and really my hero growing up, my role model for me going into medicine, even though I didn't like OBGYN as much. It was a real role model, and everybody loved him. My mom and dad were respected in the medical community, the Jewish community, and just growing up, the first half of my life, you don't really think much about it. You just, you're growing up, you're a kid, you've got friends, and then career and family. But later, the last 5, 6 years, when I've been working on this project, which is a book about my dad's life, a real journey. And I'm just amazed that he could get through all that with the determination and the integrity, the hope, the resilience, and ultimately redemption by delivering kids to bring life back into the world, where in the world that they grew up was didn't have that, including my dad's parents. They were killed at Auschwitz, both of them. The grandparents I never met at 50 years old, just because they were Jewish, and millions of other people, as you know. And then you can expand World War II to 50 million people. 50 million people died, and countless, of course, injured. And we can fast forward our military injuries from Vietnam and Korea, and on and on. Iraq, 9/11, it just on and on. And the people, it's got to be so hard to overcome that kind of trauma. Some people can and some can't, but my dad did, and he chronicled it, and then I just moved forward with it. And that was just another level of pride besides his what he did as a medical career. So it's a win-win. And if you knew my dad, you'd like him. Everybody who did really liked my dad. So, and my mom, of course, too, but great sense of humor, Hungarian accent, intelligent as hell. And so is my mom. And I'm fortunate enough to be raised with intelligence, education, and love. And what else can you ask for,
That's the beautiful part of this conversation. This honestly may be one of the most beautiful campfires that I've had the pleasure of being a part of, because here we sit at this stage of our lives. We're adults now, and we look back at our ancestors, the ones that have come before us, and we heard their stories. We've interpreted them into our lives to get the lessons that we need, but we get to become the voice for that journey and share that. And that's one thing that I really find beautiful about your book. So I want to take some time to not only honor your story, but I want to really build and expand upon that. So walk me through just a little bit of that story to start.
Okay, my dad wrote his autobiography in the 70s. My mom and dad, the book it's called Not a Real Enemy, The True Story of a Hungarian Jewish Man's Fight for Freedom. The book has won 4 awards, which I still don't even know what to do with that. That's a miracle in itself, but, and I'm not big into self-congratulations, but it's something, it's an honor to have people that are in the know that that's what they do, to realize what the quality of the work is and the importance of the work. So I'm not going to pat myself on the back. I have to compliment my whole team, including my co-author, Janice Harper, who's also from Michigan Connection, PhD, and a great team that's helped me with that. And also that the awards don't mean anything if it doesn't help me in the fight against anti-Semitism. It really doesn't. And so, but the book was, my dad wrote the autobiography in the 70s. It covers Hungary from the end of World War I to the end of the Hungarian Revolution in 56. Not a lot of people know about that, including myself before I got into the project. It's my dad's biography. It's an adventure. It's a history book, and it's also the trials and tribulations of my dad's family and what happened with them. So there's a lot to it. So they wrote the autobiography in the 70s, from pencil and paper to typewriter to computer to disc. My dad passes away in 1997, unfortunately, my mom in 2016. A historian friend in my mom's hometown hands me, it's now on a disc, and she says, you really have to read this. And I didn't think much of it at the time, but I spent a year taking care of my mom's affairs, and then I retired for a year. And then in 2018, a friend, talk about not burning bridges, a former partner of mine from Flint said, look, we're short a radiologist, and can you help us out part-time, 2 days a week? So I went back to work, and I had that job for about 5 or 6 years before I finally retired this last year. And that brought me to the book. So that was the thing about that job, is that the book sort of called me, like I like to say, like Superman's kryptonite. It summoned me. And so as a radiologist, we have two screens, the left and the right, and the left is the patient queue, and the right are the images. And between cases, I loaded up the disc, and my dad's autobiography was there, and I turned it into a biography. So it was really good that I went back to work, because maybe I never would have done this. Needless to say, that's another year. So we're in 2019, can't get the book published. We're going to self-publish, but it was kind of a boring biography. I had it historically reviewed. I did my own homework, but I needed help. So I got Janice through a friend of a friend, and she helped me polish the book and make it into something really special. Parallel stories, converging stories, stories that are in and out of order, conversations, letters to and from home, the whole Megillah, the whole works. And then she helped me query and vet out agents and publishers. And bottom of the ninth, shoestring catch, we picked up Amsterdam publishers who they were endeared by the book and took it. And here we are. If it weren't for all these people and people that cared, and the quality of my dad's writing, and the stories, just the miracles in the stories. Needless to say, Dad was a four-time escape artist. So I know you'd like his first and last escape as an outdoorsman. I'm sure you'll really, really like those stories. It sounds like you already read the book, though, too. And 20 miracles in the book. I mean, how could I leave it on a computer? The stories were so amazing. I can't leave it on a computer or a disc. So I decided to share it with the world. And here we are a few years later. It's been 6, 7 years now doing this.
I talk about it all the time, and the idea of how important it is to put a voice to life experiences and share those stories, because there's something important that is going to affect somebody's life. And, as you work through it, it sounds like it really truly affected your life. It gave you a cause, a new direction, and something to pump some energy into, really.
Such a great question. Yeah, I don't get to say this enough. I changed vectors. It changed my whole outlook, not only learning the history, but learning about man's resilience, like we said, and how brutal people can be to each other, and how right my parents were from writing this back in the set. We're talking, they wrote this 50 years ago, as though they knew anti-Semitism and racism and hate would be a problem now. And one of the things I've learned is how brutal people treat each other, and how that's evolved, persecution and murder and torture and starvation. It happened then, and it's happening now. I mean, when are we ever going to learn? So that's part of and my dad wrote the story, not only that for me to read, but also to publish, as though they knew that I would, and I probably already said that. But anti-Semitism in the backdrop, you see, you get the whole picture, you get the point right away, how wrong the world is, and the type of world they had to live in. So you're on
That
point with that. It's very motivating, and yeah, it's very life changing.
No, it is, because I mean, I can relate to it in my journey. Here I was, just a simple factory worker, showing up, punching the clock, doing my 8 hours, punching out, going home, living what I thought was the textbook life, right? And then I come up to a situation where life smacked me in the face, said, you know what, you need to go on this completely different venture. And here I am now, sharing that journey as tools to overcome the same adversities, the same struggles that I'd faced. And to see the reaction, the response, and really the overall growth in people that I work with and share this stuff with, it's breathtaking. It's things that in that old train of thought, through those old eyes, I could never picture. We have to actually live and work our way through the journey while being open enough to understand the context of what it is that we're experiencing, to discover that voice, to put action behind and validate all the things that we go through in life, all the experiences and emotions that we struggle with, and really discover how to live behind that value and that mission statement that is hidden somewhere within our heart.
So well said. I couldn't say that better myself. The only thing I've had 27 jobs in my lifetime, maybe 28, if you include things like the being a book author or taking care of my mom's affairs, or residency, fellowship, moonlighting, training. So when you say just a factory worker, don't everybody's role is important. Don't be condescending, because I started off as a volunteer in the physical therapy department. We were cleaning out the hot tubs. The next year, I was a custodian. They called it what? Environmental services. I was a janitor. I mean, and you take pride when you get that first paycheck, or you're getting paid monthly. It is such a big feeling. It's such a nice feeling and you take your job seriously, no matter what it is. To me, you want to do a good job at it. And like you, changed vectors, well, many times, because you change a big vector from college to med school to residency, to actually working and realizing that there's no substitute for experience. It's another important point. I tell the kids that. And I also say, enjoy your youth, because life is short. It's the only commodity we have. Real estate, gold, stocks, bonds, crypto. Those are man-made things. Inflation rates, interest rates. These are all man-made things. They weren't made by God. And but time is our only commodity. And so I like to reiterate that. Ask the victims of 9/11. Ask most of the people in my dad's neighborhood and in their country that didn't make it. We're talking about a large number of people in a very short period of time. Split second timing in my dad's story, that I'm lucky to be here. He was lucky to make it here. And I like to think of it as a little bit of the hand of God, even though we weren't really religious. My temple was Orthodox, so I went to Hebrew school and bar mitzvah in an Orthodox temple, but sort of forgot about. But I think that I'm honoring my father and my mother many times over by doing this project, even though I might be ignoring some of the other commandments. And I don't mean that seriously, but you only have so much time to do this and that. And by far, it's our best commodity. So I'm glad you had a metamorphosis too. That's another thing, is talking about, if you're not happy with life, do something else. Go part-time, write a book, read a book, go to the museum, spend more time with family, give back to the community, bring a neighbor a cupcake or a cup of coffee, or whatever the case may be. But learn to like each other, learn to like our neighbors. And if you don't have to hang around with them, but don't threaten their lives, don't threaten to hurt them, don't threaten their businesses. That's not going to help our country. That's not going to help our world, for sure.
And I think deep down inside of each of us, there is that seed of contributing to the greater good, but we get hung up on that huge cloud of adversity, which is shrouded in fear. Because, like you mentioned, the idea of, if you don't like where you're at in life, go out and change it. We have that ability to blaze our own trails, but that grass is really tall. It's really hard to see what's going to be in there. And you've got to kind of work your way through that slowly and allow yourself the grace to understand where you're at, craft the hatchet, whatever tool it may take to cut the grass down,
Uh,
and keep
well
that
said.
within your heart, that vision. Keep that vision within your heart, and not allow that fear to begin to project itself outward onto your surroundings, onto the environment, and push you back into survival mode, where all those negative actions and behaviors really like to fester.
It's funny you say fear, because that came up this week on a podcast, that the gentleman, the host, said he thinks the opposite of love is fear. And I think, well, that's kind of true. But to me, the opposite of love is indifference or apathy. So, and fear is definitely a big part of what happened to my parents, because they're on the wrong end of the gun, the wrong end of the missile, the wrong end of the tank. So there's fear. I think poverty has a lot to do with, like, what happened in Gaza, and what happened in, of course, Nazi Germany in the 30s during the Great Depression, which affected all of Europe. My dad chronicles that too. So fear and indifference are both the opposite. And so also, of course, religion is a part of our conflict in the world, unfortunately, and territory. Those are the big ones to me. So the fear, and then of course poverty and multiple factors for the propagation of hate. And look, we want to help these people educate themselves, and let's learn to move on. Let's learn to help people that don't get that help. These citizens of Gaza, for example. I love the squirrels. Oh my God, that is so Michigan. We got plenty down here in Florida too, but I know you noticed them, so they're so cool. They're cool. Anyway, I don't mean to digress, but no, that fear is a big thing. Fear is a big part of why there's hate, no doubt.
It's actually the timing of the squirrels is very ironic because I'm big on animal medicine and learning lessons from animals. And if you think about the behavior of a squirrel, they just ran through doing exactly what you talked about in a completely different language. Because to them, it's all about going around and collecting nuts and food for the winter, right? And you know that they each see where each other's bearing their supplies. So it may be something that they, one of their least favorite spots, but somebody else knows it's there and they put it there so somebody else can come in and get it. And when you think about us as humans, with that ability to tell stories, that ability to teach one another from those stories and from sitting around a fire like this, we have skills, we have strengths, we have weaknesses. We really embrace the strength, but we get away from the weakness. And if we went to somebody that maybe their strength was one of our weaknesses and our strength was their weakness, we could trade back and forth. And instead of allowing the fear of something we don't understand to destroy that bridge, we could actually reinforce it by teaching each other.
Oh, great you say that. Well, the expression somebody being squirrely, it fits because it means they're fearful, they're squirrely, they're afraid, they tap dancing around the truth, or they want to avoid you, they don't want to be around you, or they're holding something from you. So that is a type of fear. And then that begs the question, why do dogs get along more than cats? Because cats are known to be very territorial. Why do cats get along with humans if they're treated right? And certainly dogs, the nature of a dog, a loyal dog, is even more so, right? So why isn't my dog afraid of me, whereas the squirrel that hangs around my backyard is? It begs a strange question. And I mean, even lions and alligators are afraid; they're fearful, but their reaction, since they're big animals and they can really defend themselves a lot better than a squirrel or say insect or whatever you might example you might want to use. So birds are the same way. Birds they're fearful. They're comfortable in their zone, but when you approach them, but ducks are not so much, weird. And actually squirrels, I got to say, my rest in peace, my father-in-law used to feed the squirrels on his back porch all the time, like 3 or 4 of them. They'd always come right up to him. And in some cases they would eat right out of his hand. So that's a trust that you learn. And it probably takes a lot of time to get that. But speaking of which, they're back. They're unbelievable. I love it. They look
You know,
like
I love I love the analogy with the dog because if you think about, at least from my point of view, and listening to and studying a lot of Native American storytelling, if you think about their ancestors and their relationship to the coyote is always the trickster. He's always the one that lets man out of the bag, right? And we've crafted and shaped the world. We've changed everything. So that brought the fear with the animals, except for the coyote. The coyote learned to adapt and face the adversity of change. He wasn't going to let us control the world and take it away from him. He began to learn to live with us, to cohabitat and coexist in order to keep his position. And I think that through that thought process, you can look at how the fear of change really shaped the animal's behaviors nowadays.
I would, yeah, I would, an ecotone. That's the word I remember. Ecotone from 6 Feet Under is the first time I heard that word, which was a really great program. And they do have a lot of nature scenes. They have some hikes and retreats that they do, which is pretty cool. They get out of LA. Um, yeah, I grew up with a Hungarian Vizsla, and she was great. She was like my little sister. I'd take her cruising Gratiot, and not a mean bone in her body. She was friendly with everybody. And I ran into a Hungarian Vizsla a couple of days ago when I was hiking here in Florida, and beautiful dog, younger, and it's heartbreaking to see, years after your dog's passed, but it's also heartwarming. And I asked him, well, where did you breed? Where did you buy this dog? And he said, Northern Michigan. So I said, well, I'm from Michigan. So we had a nice 10-minute conversation. And I said, I want to know who your breeder is, because when I get that white picket fence, maybe if I'm lucky enough to make 75 or 80, I'd love to have a Hungarian Vizsla or a Weimaraner. I've got a good friend that's all he buys is a Weimaraner. And the loyalty is so palpable. So yeah, we can learn a lot from the animals, their teammanship. And don't forget the wolf, my last name, because they're great family. They're great family animals, right? They hunt and pat. They're the togetherness, the cohesiveness is there, you know. So
They're another beautiful example of facing adversity and learning from it, really. And, to me, that's what this conversation really highlights is that ability to learn from one another. A lot of us go through life where we live in survival mode. We're fearful of where whatever we're looking for is going to come next. And that's the root of a lot of the, I guess, lack of time to really learn and develop new things, to really understand everything that's going on around us. And because we don't build that understanding, we're fearful of it. We hate it. We want to attack it and get rid of it. If we took the time to simply slow down and look at the fact that we're sitting here in this patch of land, we can build a shelter so we can get out of the elements. We've got comfort. Now we can go accumulate sticks and build a fire. So now we've got warmth. We've got the ability to clean water, cook food. We can move on to the next step. We can learn, we can advance. And all these different metaphors that we use for it, this is really what the human journey is all about. And if we're going to improve our overall quality of life, it's important to step into that garden of fear. Start knocking down those branches and the weeds and cut down that stuff and look over it. Embrace the fear because fear is really the opportunity to learn.
no doubt. I mean, there's the fear of death. My ex's niece just passed away, 38, a couple of days ago, 38 years old. I mean, again, we're back to time as our commodity, but a lot of people fear death, and I mean, I don't embrace it, but it's gonna be challenging. Getting older is challenging. Things happen to you that you don't expect. You bring up another good point, because what happened to my dad could have happened to any one of us, and it still could. Could be a bad neighbor, a bad business deal, local government, federal government, foreign government, natural disaster, you name it. So you could be on the run, not having food, not having shelter, not having new clothes, not having a job, not knowing where you're going. So we talk about the light at the end of the tunnel, but for my dad, even though he was escaping with his friend Frank, by the way, the first two escapes, where are you going to? You're going to get hunted, even if you get out of with the mountains and away from the forced labor camp and the beatings and the getting urinated on and the fear, you still don't know where you're going. So no light. And when you say food, shelter, clothing, I like to say this too. For us as Americans and people that are lucky to live in the free world, have families, work, focus on things like vacations and enjoying that little bit of extra food. There's more to life than food, shelter, clothing, which is why I'm doing things like this. But for my mom and dad and many, many other survivors and non-survivors, food, shelter, clothing was everything. That was all they wanted. And it's so disgraceful that they had to live like that.
You know, it's 110% true. And we look back on history and we realize that there's a lot of things that we're not proud of that have happened throughout the course of human evolution. But the unique part about it is the fact that the stories and the history are always told by the winner. So a lot of the times those things kind of get swept under the rug. But there's so many important things that we can learn and gain from by actually picking up that carpet and looking underneath it.
So it's a great. I like that. Pick up the carpet and look underneath it. You might find that quarter. You might find that gold. No doubt about it. We don't talk enough about Auschwitz. I can't imagine the fear being herded into a town center and then corralled onto trains packed like sardines, and then you end up in this horrible place with a horrible smell, and you know what's coming, and it's this prolonged agony. I can't imagine the fear. God forbid if you're on a plane and it's going down. I mean, I can't imagine the fear there. Things like that. not knowing what's going to happen. Even driving in Florida is fearful. I exhale the whole time because the drivers in Michigan, they were raised in the Detroit area. They're Detroit, Motor City, and there's a few crazy drivers in Michigan, but down here, wow, it's crazy. So every time I get in the car and get on I-95, you're looking around left and right, and you try not to be fearful, but some people are scary on the road. So you never know. Running into schizophrenics, people that are not, they don't have their mental health under control. They're unfortunate, and they're undertreated too, and the homeless is another. I'd be scared to death being on the street every day, especially up in the cold. But even down here, you can tell these poor people, they've got nothing, and it's so much of it. Uh, I'm fearful for their own lives too, but I mean, this is my corner, my project of trying to give back to humanity. So I can't do it all, but I'd like to see that kind of thing improved, and no doubt about it.
I agree with you 110%. I mean, yeah, it's a different arena than the one that I spend my time engaged in. However, they still coexist.
Of
They're
course.
both they're both so important because you can't have one without the other. You can't overcome your own personal struggles without that having a greater impact on the community and on society.
You
And I
have to have
think
oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go for it.
We have to have a mutual respect. That's the thing, and also this came up recently, and it does come up from time to time. The other person's got a story. I'm not the only one with a story, or my dad's story, or yours, or your family's story, but everybody got a story. So if they're having a bad day, including on the roads, I suppose, I mean, angry driving, that exists. But everybody, I mean, don't threaten my life with it, but everybody's got a story. So like you said, slow down, sit back. And if somebody's angry or crying or sad or ridiculously happy, you understand where they're coming from, that they might be having a very good day or a very bad day, or sometimes it's both, and that's in this journey. Sometimes you think you're having the best day in the world, and you get that bad phone call or that bad piece of mail or bad news from home, and it just changes in a dime.
It does. It's important to remind yourself, not only are you going to experience both the good and the bad of life, but everybody else does too. And you really honestly don't know where somebody's at in the moment. So opening up your heart and having a little bit more compassion, a little bit more understanding for what they could be going through, even if you don't know, is a very powerful tool.
No doubt about it. It's and that's the guide. That's the pathway to peace. That's the pathway to. I look at these innocent civilians in Gaza, and people want to lump them in with the Hamas and the brutal treatment they had of all of those prisoners that they still have many, and but their own people too. And finally, they seem to be rising up a little bit and trying to say, look, cut it out. The rest of the Middle East wants peace, and Syria is working on it, and many other countries are working with Israel. And I want to see that with our own government too. And North Korea, man, that's been since the 50s, even before then. We got now we're trading partners with Vietnam. We're talking about fair tariffs, and that was even a more recent war than Korea. But we settled it and we moved on. But North and South Korea is a disaster. Iran is a disaster. I mean, they're the forefront of it. So I don't know. It'd be nice to just wake up. Iran almost wasn't like that. They almost changed. They almost, they had this point that a younger generation and they wanted reform, and somehow the wrong people took charge, and here we are still. So it's unnecessary. It puts us behind many years. Another thing on this journey, one person said all our malfeasance, COVID, war, pestilence, whatever, has set us back, mankind, about 400 years. And that's a crazy thought, because we could already be on the moon and Mars. We could be living the Jetsons, living the Jetsons, where we're in drones driving and we don't have to deal with traffic jams, or a dome, the nuclear dome, the big protection, like the Twilight Zone concept and the Ronald Reagan concept, where we could all have our countries protected with domes that work. And yeah, it's a little imagination, but it's still 400 years is a long time to be. We can see now this technical revolution, how quickly it's evolving, just like the industrial revolution at the turn of the last century. So we could be doing even better. But we'll see what happens. Let's see what the Middle East shows. Let's get that Ukraine war done already. That's the Hungarian Revolution on steroids, I call it. It's ridiculous how many people are dying, and both countries are devastated, and they're not getting anywhere. It's a big standoff.
I think the underlying point there is enough to really spark the idea of imagination. Because as much as you talk about there being the disaster, there's always hope. But in order to find that hopeful outcome, you have to imagine, you have to envision it. And I think whether it's on a global scale or you bring that scope inward and you look at where you're at now, it's a tool that is within your heart that you can tap into. And I really hope this conversation is the one that inspires that idea to dream, to really look at your surroundings, see what that environment looks like and what you can craft out of it to get to where you're trying to go. And as the fire starts to wind down, I want you to go ahead and let people know not only what you're working on now, how they can get a hold of the book, get in touch with you, work with you, all that good stuff.
I brought my a copy with me. May I show it or?
Absolutely.
All
Feel
right, I
free.
always want to ask because I don't want to be too. So it's not a real enemy. Sorry if there's some glare. It's probably from the smoke and the fire. Not a not a real enemy. The true story of a Hungarian Jewish man's fight for freedom. I have a few other books in mind. I don't know if I'm ever going to get to them, but even if I wrote another book, this by far will be my most important book. You can buy the book just about anywhere. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Tufts University, one of my alma maters, 4 Holocaust museums, and hopefully more down the road, including the mothership, the U.S. Holocaust Museum in D.C. But you can find it easily. If you Google Not a Real Enemy, if you Google Robert J. Wolf, MD, you'll find me. Happy to discuss the contents of the book. And I'm on social media across the board. I'm on Meta and X, Instagram, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, and TikTok. And it's a lot of work. That's my big project now is working on a podcast with nice guys like you. That's another great thing about the adventure is meeting really nice people, people that care. Um, and robertjwolfmd.com is my website. So really, I'm easy to find. I've had a lot of help building up what I'm trying to do, and again, fight anti-Semitism with in my own little corner of it with my dad's messages that not only express that, but also the adventure is enticing, and so it's an entertaining read as well. So good and bad.
You
Not a
know,
real.
I I really enjoyed actually reading through the book. I thought it was not only inspiring to get that imagination going, but to be honest with you, there's a lot of great lessons in that book that you
Agreed.
can read and really apply quickly to your life. I love the work that you're doing. I'm happy and grateful that I get the opportunity to celebrate and support it with you. So thank you for taking the time for this wonderful, amazing conversation today.
Thank you, Mike. Much appreciated.